I lived with my mother, bearing the burden of my father's debts. Our life in an old house on the outskirts of Phoenix was constantly weighed down by financial pressure. The hot desert wind blowing through our torn screen door was as harsh as our living conditions. My mother worked as a cashier at a supermarket during the day and as a waitress at a small diner at night. She would leave at 5 a.m. and not return until 11 p.m., hardly spending any time at home. Still, she never failed to make my lunch and wash my uniform. Throughout this life, there was something my mother kept telling me. Vivian, you must never end up like me. Study hard and get a good job. Those words sometimes encouraged me, sometimes felt like a burden. When she was particularly tired, her words would take on a venomous tone. If only you'd grow up quickly and leave, I could have an easier life. When I was 15, my father died in a car accident. All he left behind was me, my mother, and enormous debts. After his death, we discovered he had lost a fortune at underground casinos. When debt collectors came to our house, my mother sent me out through the back door and dealt with them alone. That night, for the first time, she cried in front of me. He was good for nothing, she would say, drinking whiskey almost every night. The smell of cheap whiskey permeated our living room. But even so, she worked desperately to raise me. Working 2 jobs, she managed to pay for my education. Sometimes she even took on a third part-time job to cover my school trip expenses. When I entered high school, I started working at a fast food restaurant after school. I would work until late at night and do my homework with tired eyes after getting home. My grades were below average, but I desperately tried to avoid failing marks. When I nearly got my conduct grade lowered for falling asleep in class, I begged the teacher desperately, "Please, I don't want to cause my mother any more worry." What changed my life was meeting Nellie. Nellie Allen was my high school classmate. Her father, a second-generation Mexican-American, was the president of a well-known local construction company, someone from a completely different world than us. They lived in an upscale neighborhood in Scottsdale and went golfing every weekend as a family. Yet Nellie treated me no differently than anyone else. "Vivian, why don't you study at my place? My dad can kind of be like a tutor." Her house was an enormous single-family home, unimaginable from our neighborhood. When studying in her air-conditioned room, I could forget about everything, my house, the debts, all of it. On weekends, Maria, their maid, would bring us homemade cookies. Nellie's father would take time from his busy schedule to help us study. Though he knew about my family situation, he never showed pity. Instead, he gave practical advice, teaching me everything from accounting basics to business manners. "Vivian, you're a smart kid. Opportunities will come. Prepare yourself now so you can grab them when they do." Those words became my support. After high school, I went to community college. I managed tuition through a combination of scholarships and student loans. During this time, I maintained my relationship with the Allen family. Though Nellie went to State University, she always contacted me on weekends. Then, about 6 months before graduation, Nellie made me a surprising offer. "Vivian, would you like to work at our company?" An administrative staff member at Allen Construction had suddenly resigned, and she recommended me as the replacement. The salary was more than double my part-time job, with full benefits. 2 days off per week, and overtime was generally prohibited. But can I do it, without any experience? When I voiced my concerns, Nellie shook her head with a smile. "You'll be fine. You can do it. Besides, Dad trusts you." I ended up accepting the offer. Though everything was confusing at first, my senior colleagues taught me the work carefully. Nellie's father personally guided me through basic operations, telling me, "If you ever have any troubles, come talk to me anytime." 10 years have passed, and I'm now 28. I've been working at this company for 8 years. My salary has gradually increased, and I can live without my mother's support. 2 years ago, I started living alone, able to rent my own apartment. It's a small unit on the 3rd floor of Surlam Square, a newly built apartment complex. Though not spacious, it has a beautiful sunset view from the balcony. I've been dating Ian from my department for a year now. He's 2 years older than me and the chief of the accounting department. Though we haven't talked about marriage yet, I feel our feelings for each other are genuine. We spend peaceful time together on holidays, cooking, and going to movies. Since I started living alone, I've had much less contact with my mother. We only occasionally update each other by phone. Still, she remains hardworking, continuing to work 2 jobs even now. "You should take it easier now, Mom." "I'm doing fine." When I say this, she always gives the same tired response. "Thank you. But I like working. Besides, I still have loans to pay off." I had no way of knowing then that my ordinary yet fulfilling daily life was about to change dramatically. It happened one Sunday afternoon, during what was supposed to be a relaxing day off. That Sunday, I slept in for the first time in a while. Recently, we'd had several large projects in succession, leading to constant overtime during weekdays. There was even weekend work, forcing me to postpone dates with Ian. Last night too, when he called to invite me out, I had to decline, saying, "Sorry, I'm really tired." Today, I had turned off my smartphone alarm, determined to finally get some proper rest. Around 2 p.m., just as I was finally waking up, my doorbell suddenly rang. As I stared at the ceiling with sleepy eyes, waiting to see if it would ring again. After a while, the bell sound returned. Checking my smartphone showed no missed calls. Being Sunday, there shouldn't be any deliveries. Feeling slightly suspicious, I looked through the peephole and saw someone I never expected to see. "Mom?" When I opened the door, my mother was drenched in sweat. Phoenix summers are merciless. The heat rising from the asphalt made the air shimmer. The back of her floral dress was wet with sweat. "Finally you opened the door. I've been waiting for 30 minutes. There was fatigue in my mother's voice. She stumbled into the room while wiping the sweat from her forehead with a handkerchief. I hurriedly brewed some cold iced coffee. While putting ice from the refrigerator into the glass, I accidentally spilled some, distracted by my mother's appearance. "What's wrong? Why so sudden?" My mother drained the coffee in one gulp and sighed. The sound of the glass being set down echoed in the quiet room. "Actually, I fell on the stairs at home. Twisted my ankle." Indeed, she was limping slightly when walking. Those stairs at home, those steep, narrow stairs. Even as a child, I almost fell many times. The old wooden handrail probably remains unstable even now. "Did you go to the hospital?" "Yes, I got X-rays. They said there's no bone damage. But I need to rest for a while." While talking, my mother looked around my room. Though it's a small studio apartment, I keep it clean. There's a houseplant that Ian and I chose together on the kitchen counter. Photos of Nellie and me hang on the wall. "So, Mom. Why today?" "Oh, right," my mother said as if just remembering. She sat deep in the sofa, stretching out her leg. "In this condition, it's hard to live alone. I can't even go shopping. So, could I stay here for a while? Shocked by this sudden request, I was at a loss for words. True, my mother didn't look well. But to suggest living together without any prior notice? Besides, my room is really small. Too cramped for 2 people. I'll contribute to food expenses. And I'll cook, so your burden will be less, right? You seem tired from work lately. My mother's proposal sounded reasonable. She said she had taken temporary leave from her supermarket cashier job due to her injury. Apparently, she had already quit the night diner job. I thought perhaps she had fallen ill from the change in her daily routine. Though the injury didn't seem severe enough to require crutches, considering her age, living alone was indeed worrisome. The doctor had said it would heal in about 3 weeks. I considered that manageable. Besides, it seemed cruel to turn her away in this heat. All right. But next time something like this happens, please let me know in advance. My mother nodded happily. Then she dragged a large Boston bag from the entrance to the living room. The amount of luggage clearly suggested she had anticipated my answer. Nightwear and makeup pouches peeked out from inside. For the first 3 days, my mother kept her promise, making dinner with ingredients from my refrigerator. Hamburger steak, spaghetti, chicken soup. All had the same taste as when I was a child. The nostalgic flavors brought a small measure of peace to my heart. However, on the 4th day, when we ran out of ingredients, my mother's attitude changed. Let's order delivery from today. You must be tired too, right? You're young, it's okay to splurge sometimes. I shook my head. I was in the middle of saving money for my potential marriage with Ian. I wanted to avoid unnecessary expenses. Besides, continuous takeout could affect our health. I'll go shopping and cook. I'm already hungry. It'll take too long to go shopping and then cook. At my mother's characteristic wheedling voice, I couldn't help but sigh. In the end, I gave in to her insistence that day. At the supermarket, she kept putting discounted items into the cart, buying almost twice our usual amount. Though we split the bill, I wanted to avoid this becoming a habit. After that, I started buying ingredients on my way home from work and cooking myself. On holidays, I even prepared meals in advance to keep food expenses down. My mother would eat my cooking, saying, "Delicious, delicious." But she'd leave the dishes in the sink and go straight to bed after her bath. In the morning, I'd find empty beer bottles scattered in the living room. Next to the bottles, the TV remote. It seemed she watched TV all day long. Her limping hadn't changed since she arrived. But other movements had become strangely smooth. After this continued for 3 weeks, I started feeling suspicious. One morning, while cleaning the room, I noticed something wasn't right. Something was missing. Inside the closet, in the desk drawers, under the bed. But I couldn't figure out what it was. I called out to my mother, who was watching TV on the sofa. "Hey, have you seen a black paper bag? The one with the brand logo?" My mother turned around lazily, tilting the beer bottle in her hand. Her morning drinking habits hadn't changed since our old house. Seeing her flushed cheeks from drinking in the morning brought back childhood memories. Ah, that one. The bag that had the watch box in your room, right? I was curious because there was an expensive-looking box inside. My blood ran cold. That bag contained a luxury watch I had bought for Ian's birthday present. It was a limited edition model he had longed for, which I had just managed to find and purchase. I had saved 3 months' salary to buy it. What's with that scary face? I sold it. I thought it was wasteful for a young person to have such an expensive thing. My mother remained completely nonchalant, as if disposing of someone else's belongings without permission was perfectly normal. I asked, trying to control my trembling voice. Why would you do something like that? Going into my room and taking my things. Oh. Did I do something wrong? My mother put her beer bottle on the floor and stood up. For once, she didn't even pretend to limp. I sold the house. Since we're going to live together from now on, we should share money too, right? That's natural for parent and child. You sold the house? Yes. It was old and difficult to live in anyway. And the land value keeps dropping, so I sold it while I could. All the neighbors were being replaced by young people anyway, right? Her words made me dizzy. That old house contained everything: memories with father, memories of our difficult days, everything. The grave of the kitten buried in the corner of the garden, the height measurements marked on the kitchen wall, all would pass into strangers' hands. Why didn't you even consult me? At least you could have told me. Oh. It's my house, isn't it? Besides, since I'm going to live with you now, it can be a down payment when we look for a new house. Let's make new memories together. My mother's voice turned sickeningly sweet. It was the same tone she used when trying to get her way when I was a child. Hey, Vivian. Are you planning to abandon me? Your mother who raised you. After I cleared all the debt your father left behind? At that moment, something snapped inside me. Abandon you? Have you ever considered my feelings, Mom? My voice naturally grew louder. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Barging into my home, selling my things. How is this living together? You're no different from a thief. My mother's expression changed completely. She stared at me with cold eyes I had never seen before. They somewhat resembled the look she had when confronting debt collectors at our old house. Oh, is that how you want to play it? Then let me ask you something. My mother deliberately picked up her beer bottle. Her fingers turned white from gripping it so tightly. What part of this house has your money in it? What? I'm paying $5,000 in rent, aren't I? $5,000? I couldn't believe my ears. You only gave me $50 last month? And that was just for part of the food expenses. My. You've gotten quite insolent. Who do you think put you through college? Suddenly, my mother overturned the beer bottle above my head. Cold liquid dripped down. The unpleasant smell of beer seeped into my hair, which had been fragrant with shampoo. A parasite living off their parent has no right to talk. Parasites need to be disinfected with alcohol. My mother laughed eerily while opening a new beer bottle. The popping sound echoed unusually loud. Even though I sold my house for you, you go and buy expensive watches. Since we're going to share our lives, we should share our assets too, right? I'll put the money from selling the watch toward the rent, so don't complain. I stared at my mother while wiping off the beer with trembling hands. She was completely drunk. Or perhaps this was her true nature. Had all the kindness she showed until now been an act? But this apartment. I started to say, then fell silent. This apartment was scheduled for demolition next month. The eviction notice for redevelopment had been announced months ago. I had explained this to my mother. But she seemed to have completely ignored such important information. Or had she deliberately ignored it? Mom, we have to move out of this apartment next month. It's being demolished. My mother's expression froze. The beer bottle in her hand rolled onto the carpet. You're lying. The landlord sent multiple notices. In the pink envelopes. Those letters? I thought they were advertisements. I mean, why would they tear down such a nice apartment? My mother's voice gradually grew louder. Aided by alcohol, her words became increasingly aggressive. Why didn't you tell me? You tricked me. I did explain. You just weren't listening. It's always like this. You ignore everything that's inconvenient. But my mother wasn't listening to my words at all. She had already opened another beer bottle and was muttering to herself. Her eyes were vacant. After I sold the house, where can I go? The money. At that moment, I made my decision. I couldn't continue this situation any longer. Can you leave by tomorrow? Having finished wiping off the beer, I said this in a cold voice. I felt that any further compromise would mean losing myself. What did you say? My mother's eyes bulged. You're throwing me out? Mom, how long do you plan to continue this? What happened to the money from selling the house? My mother was momentarily lost for words. Then, averting her gaze, she muttered. It's gone. Gone? You just sold the house? Online casino. My mother said in a resigned tone. I just tried it a little. Before I knew it, I had used it all. I closed my eyes. How could my mother, who had suffered from my father's gambling debts, repeat the same mistake? The money from the watch too? Yes. But that was your fault. My mother suddenly raised her voice. Buying an expensive watch when I'm in such trouble. I'm still your mother. I used it gambling for your future. If I had one, we could have had a better life. The excuse was unbearable to hear. Pack your things. I said quietly but firmly. Take all your belongings with you. Vivian, are you really going to do this to me? Leave your mother homeless? My mother started crying. But I could no longer tell if those tears were real or just an act. Get ready in 5 minutes. I won't wait any longer. My mother started frantically packing her things. But as my calm demeanor continued, she gradually revealed her true nature. Leave the furniture. It's all mine. You're the one leaving on your own. What? I bought all of this myself. Society won't forgive a daughter who throws out her own mother. I smiled coldly. Should we call the police? For breaking and entering and theft? At those words, my mother froze. She had always been extremely afraid of the police. Perhaps it had been traumatic since the incident with my father's debt collectors. In the end, my mother left with only minimal belongings. At the exit, she turned back with final words. You'll regret this. The punishment for abandoning your mother will surely come back to you. I closed the door. Then I deleted my mother's phone number from my cell phone. A week later, I got a call from the landlord. My mother was causing a disturbance in front of the building. But I chose not to get involved. I'm sorry. She's no longer someone I know. I heard later that she was escorted out by security guards. There were rumors that she started working at a live-in job, but I haven't confirmed this. I accepted the plan transfer to our branch office as scheduled. Ian is coming too. We're preparing to start a new life in a new place. Let's get married. The other day, Ian proposed to me. It was a sudden proposal, without even a ring yet. I've heard everything about your story. Let's overcome it together. The break with my mother left me with an important lesson. Love and dependence are different. Control disguised as self-sacrifice isn't true love either. While looking for a new apartment, I discussed the future with Ian. About children, work, and what kind of family we want to create. When we have children, I will absolutely not repeat my parents' mistakes. Ian nodded gently at my words. Sometimes I wonder about my mother. But I've decided to keep that as a story from the past in my heart. The path my mother chose is her own responsibility. What I can do is learn from those mistakes and guide my own life in the right direction. My father's debts, my mother's gambling, and their twisted love. These negative legacies end with my generation. Our new life in a new city is about to begin. The warm morning sun illuminates our future.